Hello, ho, ho, and welcome to Of Significance, the economics podcast where the spirit of the season is always accuracy. I'm your every person host, Brent Buckert, here with the man who checked Santa's list by running a chi-squared test to see if it's balanced, Dr. Nathan Woods, and the man who dreams of a white noise Christmas, it's Dr. Steve Bronars. Happy holidays, gentlemen. How are you?
Happy holidays, Brent.
Great.
It's the holiday season, so rather than dig into the minutia of regression analysis or what's happening with the unemployment rate, we wanted to talk about some holiday topics that were all about getting you in the spirit of the season. First, we're going to figure out why it feels like the holiday season starts earlier and earlier, and then we'll tell you the one best gift that every economist loves. Picture it. It's a crisp fall day. You're reminiscing about the fun you had at this year's Halloween. Your Moodang costume was a huge success when suddenly you see Santa Claus in a window display. Was that there this time last year? And then you think back year over year. Surely Christmas decorations weren't up before Thanksgiving. How did we get in this economic twilight zone where the holiday season starts early and earlier? Steve, I want to go to you. How did this happen? Why do we always think that Christmas comes sooner and sooner every year?
I think it's a good question, Brent. And the theory that I have is that when you look at the retail sector, they're so dependent on that holiday season. And so the data that I looked at, the National Retail Foundation, they defined the holiday season pretty broadly. They go, what are the sales based on, U.S. government census data in the months of November and December? And traditionally, those months have higher sales across all of retail, probably about 25% higher in those per month in those last 2 months than the first 10 months of the year. And those retailers are employing more people in the months of November, December. Presumably, some of them are temporary, part-time, and then they have more overtime hours in November, December, so their costs are higher. And the employment is probably about 20% higher, but that's going to vary, both the amount of sales and the employees in that holiday season, depending on the type of retailer. So clothing stores really have a big boost towards the end of the year. And from their point of view, they would probably like to spread out those sales throughout the year so they can get more sales early and not concentrated in the last few weeks of the year. It would be easier for them to do that. So I think that's why they put out the holiday decorations earlier, to try to get people to make those spending decisions earlier. And then I think the rest of us just followed it. And so we put out our decorations earlier too. But I don't think there is as much reason for us as there would be for the retailers.
So kind of foundationally, Steve, how much do people spend during the holiday season?
Again, using the definition of like the months of November and December, and obviously there's a lot more retail sales in December than in November, it's getting close to $1 trillion in terms of what the total retail spending is in just those 2 months. And so that's a pretty big chunk of the economy behind those numbers.
So you try to do some analysis of these months and what effects cause there to be greater sales or less sales. What exactly did you do and why? And how dare you?
The one thing that occurred to me is that if we look at this year, Thanksgiving's coming very late, right? So you don't have as many days in there if you're going to buy Christmas presents to squeeze in. It's the shortest possible time. The latest Thanksgiving was on the 20th, so you got 27 days. And then there are other years in which Thanksgiving could occur as early as the 22nd, and you have 33 days. So the question I had was, do people spend more when they have more time from Black Friday to Christmas than in the other years where, like 2024, where it's compressed? And what I found was that if you go back kind of pre a lot of internet purchases, online purchases, and so between like the early 1990s and 2010, it was true that every extra day in between Thanksgiving and Christmas raised total sales for the holiday season by about 0.6%, which if you go back to what holiday spending was in 2010, it was about $500 billion, 500 billion. So every extra day that you could squeeze in between Thanksgiving and Christmas meant $3 billion more in sales, which is not a trivial amount. And it could be as many as, 6 extra days. And so those would be the really good sales years when you had lots of time in there. And you could think that retailers know that, and they go, that's why we want people to start doing their holiday shopping even before Thanksgiving. But at least until 2010, it didn't seem like people were doing that. But more recently, I think the patterns have changed.
How did that pattern change, Steve?
Well, I think that the one big factor that I alluded to that has changed is how much sales are occurring online. And so one possibility, of course, these are just kind of correlations. There's not really a sophisticated analysis that I did. But one of the possibilities is people are buying more and more items online, they're less dependent on kind of the holiday schedule of, okay, we got to start doing the shopping on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, and we make our purchases in that window. And it seems like that's a possibility for what's happened, because online sales are now such a big part, more than a quarter of that $1 billion total, that if that's what the shopping patterns are now, that might also explain why the season between Black Friday and Christmas is just less important than it used to be.
So that reminds me, Steve, of something we've talked about before around March Madness, when it seems like almost every year in March Madness, the college basketball tournament, there's discussion of lost productivity because of those games that come on during the day. And you and I talked about this many years ago and said, well, you're never really going to lose that productivity. You're not going to get it at that time when you're distracted watching those basketball games, but the work is there to get done. So you're going to get it done, eventually. And so my question is, with this whole holiday, season, that stuff's going to get sold regardless, right? It doesn't matter. And it sounds like what you're saying is, at least since 2010 or something, maybe that's the case, that people are not feeling constrained by Thanksgiving being in the rearview mirror and they're buying stuff whenever they want to.
Yes. And I think that even when there was this effect, that the amount of time between Thanksgiving and Christmas did matter. It mattered by a few percent. And so I think the sales could still be there either way, more or less. But I do think it's true that the more concentrated the sales are in a relatively short amount of time, the more the retailers, when it's a brick and mortar retailer for sure, have to be open longer hours, have more temporary seasonal employees, more overtime hours. So the cost may be a bit higher as well. But I think that it's generally true that the spending is going to be there. It's going to really depend on, the other thing I accounted for is like how the economy is doing in my little regression. That's really important. If we're in a recession, holiday sales really drop. If the economy is doing well, holiday spending is more. That's going to be way more important than the number of days in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, even in the decades before 2010, before there was a lot of online shopping.
So if we want to get more value about for those days between Thanksgiving and Christmas, maybe we should just move Thanksgiving up more days now.
Yeah.
Let's start it in the middle of November or the day after.
We should have gone to like the Canadian Thanksgiving or something, which is I don't even know when that is, but it's way earlier.
Some people say it's a myth.
But yeah, we should have just moved Thanksgiving earlier. Why not? I think being on a Thursday is kind of an important thing. So I think we would keep that true, but why not like the third Thursday rather than the fourth Thursday?
Yeah, I feel like there's not a lot going on in June. Let's put it there.
See, I think that's one of the, like, you run these regressions and you go like, yeah, over each day, but then like you're extrapolating way out of the sample there by moving it like 4 months earlier or something. half a year
earlier.
5 months.
So I got a question for you too. When do you put up your Christmas decorations?
As a rule, never before Thanksgiving. So ideally, and at the earliest, it would be the weekend following Thanksgiving. We usually don't make it that weekend.
Yeah.
But at best, that would be the weekend.
What about you, Steve?
No earlier than the day after Thanksgiving, even though whether it's on the 22nd or the 28th, it really has to do with that. But that would be the earliest, and sometimes it just other things are going on, and wait till the next weekend. But it'd probably be over a weekend. It'd either be the weekend right after or after that.
Maybe the next year.
I like to put them up before Thanksgiving because I want to get the most utilization out of it without it feeling truly, insane. I know people who put up their Christmas decorations the day after Halloween just to get the most out of it, but that seemed aggressive to me.
Yeah, I think I don't want to step on Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving is just an excellent, all the food, all the family, all the gathering. I just, I want to make sure that you don't trample all over that with your decorations. And now we're very close to the holidays as you're listening to this, but it was like a month ago that the holiday decorations started going up in our offices. And look, if you're listening, we appreciate it, but too early. Am I right?
I disagree.
I think because we're not a retailer, I think it's too early. I understand the retailer trying to say let's spread out this relatively fixed amount of sales to more of the days of the year, but I don't think we have any holiday sales at Edgeworth. Not that I know of.
Now that we've talked about the unrelenting expansion of holiday sales, I wanted to get into what really matters, which is presents. So I've got a major problem, and I can use your help to present it. Nathan, you're a normal person. What's the best gift to give people?
There's a lot of good options. I'm going to go kind of general, not knowing who I'm giving it to. Sure. I'm going to say just a really excellent bottle of wine.
And why is that?
Well, everybody likes a bottle of wine, I think, and it's also possible they'll invite me in and I'll help them share it. But yeah, bottle of wine can't go wrong.
Great. Steve, you're an economist. What's the best gift to give people?
Cash.
And Steve, why is that?
Because people know their own preferences better than you do. And they will spend the money in the way that gives them the most utility. And so you're really showing how much you care about them by giving them cash and the way they can get the most out of it.
Okay, so this highlights my problem. There's tons of times where the lay public disagrees with an economist and the layperson is just wrong. But on this issue, every person disagrees with economists, and economists still insist they are right. And I know every person disagrees with economists because economists don't give their kids cash as presents. Steve, wouldn't revealed preferences show that economists need to alter this line of reasoning?
Yeah, I was half joking with that answer. I think that if you don't really know the person, then cash clearly is a better kind of gift. And so, but if you have a relationship with the person, there are reasons why you might expect these in-kind, non-cash gifts because the utility of the giver also matters in this equation. The idea that cash may be what the recipient cares about, well, what about the person who's giving the gift? They have a say in it too.
They've got the most important say. This is not really about the recipient at all. And what happens is if you're giving somebody cash, you're at the point where it's not fun for you any longer to do the shopping, to think big thoughts about what they might really like and do that research and get out there and enjoy that process. And so if you are giving them something that's not cash, then it's because you're still enjoying that process and the build up and the discovery that happens as the person who's buying the gift. And that's where the utility really is. And that's why we don't give cash.
Right. Going out, being a person who's thinking about someone else and what they might want, and then spending the time, the effort to go get that thing and then bring it to them and then wrap it. There's a lot of extra costs associated with buying a gift that if I was given cold hard cash, I I would still have to do a lot of work to actually get the gift. I feel like if you're going to give,
if you were given cash,
if I was giving cash, I have to go now. I got to go out and find a gift for myself. I've got to go do research on products and quality.
You would mark it up. You'd say like, I need another 40%.
Yeah, give me another 60% of that cash, and I'll say, okay, you know what? This is more thoughtful. You were considerate of my time.
But they have to give it to you in parts, right? It's got to be earmarked, which is the gift and which is the markup.
Because you don't want your Christmas present gifts to be fungible.
I think that there is a little bit of truth to that. I would say when Nathan says that he would give a bottle of wine, Nathan knows a lot more about wine than I do. And so that would be imparting that knowledge, which I think is a good thing, right? He's going to pick out something that would take me more time and effort. But I think that if it's for some other things, the Economist's Guide to Gift Giving, which is this book called Scroogeonomics by Joel Waldfogel. It's like, give a gift that'd be easy to return. So that in case you give somebody, like what's this whole thing with like the ugly sweaters? I think it's because people got a bunch of bad gifts over the years and they said, okay, we just got to turn this into like wear your ugly sweater day. But you get a sweater that you don't really like, you got to return it and get the store credit or something for something you do like. I think that's a pretty common thing, or regifting thing. So, economists, again, even given what you're saying, which I think there's some truth in that, would say, hey, there could be this deadweight loss from giving people gifts that cost you $100, but the recipient only values it at $80. So you want to make sure that you're getting at least $20 of utility out of this whole process. Otherwise, we're worse off by giving the gifts. So be thoughtful about the gifts that you give to make sure that it's not something that the person would never get themselves.
Well, and I know I was talking about the giver and the utility for the giver. I think, one of the things you run into is that the receiver might also benefit from, a couple of things. One, just being surprised is nice. I'm so glad you didn't give me cash. This ugly sweater is delightful. I'm so surprised you gave it to me. And so there's some added utility, I think for that. And that makes me think of in the voting literature, people talk about, why does anybody ever turn out to vote? Because, your vote doesn't, it's not going to matter to anything unless you cast the deciding vote, and that's never going to happen. So why do people do that? And people say, well, they do that because they're excited about, the celebration of democracy and supporting democracy and participating in democracy. And so it has a utility above and beyond, strictly speaking, the utility you would get by casting that deciding vote. And so I think the kind of the surprise factor, the potential surprise factor, is some utility that you would get out of it in much the same way.
I agree with that. And that as long as the costs aren't that high, we're talking about, hey, the utility you get from this relative, okay, maybe it's not exactly what the recipient would have picked, but it's close enough. They used to have these commercials for the guy that buys his spouse a car, and she comes outside and there's like a big bow on it. And you go like, yeah, that seems like you want to make sure you've made the right decision there, because you can spend $50,000 on a car or something, and like, that's not what I want. That would be kind of a big mistake. So as long as we're talking about modest amounts, I would agree with that. If the cost of voting were like really, really high, Nathan, they're like, what are you doing going to vote? If you had to wait in line 8 hours
and spend
$20,000
once you got there,
it would be harder to rationalize. So as long as we're talking about modest sized gifts, I think that all makes sense. Like, you're showing, that your affection for somebody, and a little something about what they like, and that you're sending a signal there.
And related to that, I think there's a difference that I ran into again when I was doing my research for this episode, because I love the holidays. Where a big difference between, something for your high school kid versus something for a grandparent. You're not going to give, a grandparent probably a $50 gift card, or $100 towards maybe the purchase of a computer or something. That's something that maybe they've got and don't need, whereas they would really appreciate the extra thought that would go into a unique bespoke gift that was intended just for them. Whereas, the knucklehead high school kid, give him the cold hard cash because that's all he wants, and he's not going to appreciate the thought that went into your tailored gift choice for that high schooler anyway. So I think there are differences in who the recipient might be, their level of enjoyment that they would get out of either the cash or a thoughtful gift.
And if you don't know, why not do them both? Hey, I love getting an ugly sweater, but with $20 in the pocket.
That's a good
there you go.
Just hedge your bets. I think the Scroogenomics also makes a point about kind of just dead weight loss around people who just never use a present. And I do wonder if that's a little bit minimized when you realize how many things that you buy for yourself that you just don't use ever. And that there's always going to be some losses often with purchasing things in general. I
think that's right. I think that there are things that you thought you were going to use, your gym membership or something, and you're like, and you never get around. Like this aspirational thing, the Peloton.
Yeah, it'd be really rude to buy someone else a gym membership.
I think there are things that you buy that you go like, I don't know what I was thinking when you bought that, but I think when you say that, it's more like, that Peloton. Don't really use that as much as I thought I was going to, but that's a whole different reason for that. But I think you're right that it's always possible you buy stuff for yourself that you didn't end up using nearly as much as you thought you would.
So wrapping up, how do you guys go about getting a good gift for yourself or for others?
Well, I'll dive in first. I enjoy our kind of tradition. We get back to the great state of California, the great city of Sacramento. We also get to other places like the Los Angeles area for the holidays to see family. But there is a midtown farmers market in the city of Sacramento that can't be beat. And it's got, it's obviously got the vegetables and the fruits and all that kind of stuff, but all sorts of vendors selling all manner of goods otherwise. And so what I enjoy doing as part of our kind of holiday tradition is getting into that midtown farmers market and buying as many gifts as I can there.
Love it. What about you, Steve?
Well, my family and I are spread out geographically. You don't really know what people particularly, other than cash, which again, it's like shunned if you give somebody cash. So what we like to do is like make lists of what it is that you like. And then there's a little bit of a surprise because you don't know what is going to be picked on that list, but at least it minimizes the chance of coming up with something that the recipient is going to just want to go and return and cash in. So I'd like to rely on that kind of ask in advance. What would you like? What are you looking for? And then
when you get them the thing off the list there, Steve, do you sometimes just get them the wrong size just to make it more fun?
Yeah, definitely got to throw a few wrinkles in there. But it's sort of like the idea that people have when they're going to get married, things like that, where they register for gifts. So it's really not that bad of an idea because when you're not around people all the time, it's harder to know what it is they really would like. And if you see them on a more daily basis, maybe you can make a better guess. Hey, they would really want this item or that item.
I love the idea of lists. If we just had like a national registry where every person had to list the gifts they wanted over time, and you'd be able to find exactly what that person truly wanted. I think you would still be able to surprise them, but you know exactly what they want.
I'm not sure national registry is where our country's at right now.
That could be used for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, to get people extra presents? I don't think so, Steve. I like when people mention that they like something or over the course of the year, if they ever say, oh, this is really enjoyable, I'll make a little note in a document I've got. Oh. And when it comes time for their birthday or for Christmas,
that requires paying attention.
See, that's
true.
Well, yeah, and Brent is deriving utility from paying attention.
Yeah. So. Hey, happy holidays and happy new year from Of Significance. Thanks for listening, Stat Pack. You're the best. We'll see you next year. Well, that's been this episode of Significance. This episode's been brought to you by Edgeworth Economics, a leader in economic consulting, and with the help of our producers, Kimberly Krewald, Ryan Deal, and Brian McLamara of Brand Ready Media, with music by Armwillow Lang. Thanks for listening, StatPack, and always remember to check your assumptions.